You can't rush good work, she told him, without even looking up. Come back in 3 days. The billionaire had never been told to wait in his life. What happened next left the entire shop speechless. Before we start the story, drop a comment and tell us which city you're watching from. And don't forget to rate this one from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. Fletcher Caine was not a man who walked anywhere. He was driven, escorted, or at minimum, accompanied by someone whose entire job was to anticipate his next step. But on a Thursday afternoon in early October, with his driver stuck 2 blocks back in Austin traffic and a conference call already running 17 minutes over schedule, Fletcher Caine was walking, alone, through the kind of neighborhood he usually only saw from a car window. The east side of Austin had changed a lot in the last decade, but certain streets still held their ground. Small storefronts, hand-painted signs, window boxes with herbs instead of flowers. Fletcher moved fast, his phone pressed to his ear, half listening to his CFO recite numbers he already knew. That was when he looked down and noticed his left shoe. The sole had separated. Not a little, significantly. With every step, it flapped open like a mouth about to say something embarrassing. Fletcher stopped walking. His CFO kept talking. The shoe kept flapping. There was a shop directly to his right. A narrow storefront with a wooden sign above the door that read Sol & Son Shoe Repair in dark green letters. Below it, in smaller text, a hand-painted edition. Est. 1971. Still here. He went in. The smell, leather and oil, and something faintly chemical that should have been unpleasant but wasn't. The space was small and crammed and organized in a way that only made sense if you already knew where everything was. Wooden shelves lined every wall, filled with shoes in various stages of repair. A radio on a high shelf was playing something old, something with horns. Behind the counter, a young woman was bent over a workbench, applying adhesive to the inner sole of a boot, with the concentration of someone diffusing something delicate. Fletcher ended his call. "Excuse me." She didn't look up. "I'll be with you in a minute. I'm in a bit of a hurry." "Most people are." She smoothed the adhesive with a small brush. "That doesn't change how long this takes." Fletcher looked down at his shoe, looked back at her. "It's a sole separation, the left one. It just happened." "Okay. Can you fix it while I wait?" She finally looked up. Dark eyes, steady, the kind of expression that had clearly stopped being impressed by urgency somewhere around age 12. She glanced at his shoe, then at him. "Sit down," she said. "Let me see it." Her name, he would learn later, was Nadia Reyes, 29 years old. She had taken over the shop from her grandfather 3 years ago, when his hands got bad, and she had been learning the trade since she was 7. She did not rush. She had tried rushing once, early on, because a customer insisted, and the bond had failed 3 days later, and the customer had come back furious, and she had repaired it again for free and learned her lesson. Good work took the time it took. Fletcher sat on the small wooden bench near the door. He removed his shoe and handed it to her. She turned it over in her hands, checked the other side, pressed along the seam. "Italian?" she asked. "Yes." "Custom?" "Yes." She looked at the shoe for another moment. "You've had these for about 4 years. The heel wear pattern is consistent, which means you walk the same way every day, which means you have good posture and predictable habits." She set the shoe on the counter. "The sole separation happened at the flex point, which means it was overdue, not accidental. You've been putting stress on a joint that was already weakening." Fletcher stared at her. "Can you fix it?" "I can fix it, but if you want it done right, it'll take 3 days. I need to rebond the full seam, not just the separation point, or it'll fail again in another few months." 3 days, 3 days. I have a dinner tonight. Wear different shoes." He opened his mouth, closed it. Somewhere in his chest something shifted, the particular discomfort of a person who has spent years in rooms where every problem bends to accommodate him, encountering a problem that simply will not. "What if I pay more?" he asked. Nadia placed the shoe on the shelf behind her with the care of someone filing something important. "Sir," she said with a patience that was almost warm, "I charge for the work, not the waiting. Paying more doesn't make the adhesive cure faster." She picked up a small ticket and wrote something on it. "Come back Saturday. It'll be ready." A man near the back of the shop, older, heavy-set, repairing a heel with a rubber mallet, let out a sound that was clearly a suppressed laugh. Fletcher felt his face go warm. "Fine," he said. He walked out in one shoe and one sock until he found his car. That night, in his apartment on the 14th floor with a view of the city that had taken 3 years to acquire, Fletcher Caine sat on the edge of his bed and could not stop thinking about a woman who had told him to come back Saturday. He came back Friday. He stood outside for a moment before going in, which was its own embarrassing acknowledgement of something he wasn't ready to name. He had a perfectly good reason. He needed to check the progress. That was reasonable. That was practical. Inside, Nadia was at the workbench. A different pair of boots this time, older, well-loved, in need of significant work. She didn't look up when the bell above the door rang. "We're not open until 10, she said. "It's 10:02. She glanced at the clock on the wall, back to the boot. "Your shoes won't be ready until tomorrow." "I know. Then why are you here?" Fletcher looked around the shop, at the shelves of work waiting, at the radio playing something that sounded like Chet Baker, at the pair of tiny child's shoes on the highest shelf, clearly not for repair, clearly kept for some other reason. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. Nadia set down her tools, turned to face him with the expression of someone prepared to be mildly inconvenienced. "Ask?" "What made you choose this?" he said. "This work, this shop. You clearly could have done something else." Something moved across her face. More like the particular look a person gets when someone asks a question they've thought about. So many times it's stopped feeling like a question. "My grandfather built this shop in 1971, she said. "He came here from Oaxaca with $40 and the tools in his bag and a skill nobody wanted to pay much for, but everybody needed eventually. She picked up a brush. He repaired shoes for 50 years. He put my mom through school, and my mom put me through school, and when his hands gave out, he asked me if I wanted to take it over." She paused. "I did, even though you had other options, especially because I had other options." She turned back to the boot. "People who only do something because they have no choice don't take care of it the same way." Fletcher was quiet for a moment. "The shoes on the top shelf," he said. "The little ones." Nadia's hands stilled for just a second. "Those were my grandfather's first repair," she said, "when he was 12. Back in Mexico, he fixed a neighbor's child's shoes, and they paid him with a meal." She didn't look up. "He kept them because he said they reminded him that work done with care is worth more than money." Fletcher looked at the shoes for a long time. "Same cupcake tomorrow?" he almost said. But the words that actually came out were, "Can I come back just to see the progress?" Nadia turned around and looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully read. "You want to come back to watch someone repair shoes? I want to come back." She studied him for a moment, the kind of studying that takes inventory without apology. "You can come back," she said finally. "But if you get in the way, I'll charge you for the disruption fare." It wasn't a joke. "I know. Still fair." He came back Saturday, and the shoes were ready, as promised, and they were perfect. The seam invisible, the bond seamless, and she handed them over with no ceremony because the work itself was the ceremony. He paid. He tipped. She tried to refuse the tip, and he said it was for the 3 conversations, not the repair, and she gave him a look that meant she was filing that comment somewhere for later use. He came back the following Tuesday. He didn't have shoes that needed repair. He brought his work bag and asked if he could sit on the bench in the corner and make calls. Nadia stared at him. "You want to work here? I have back-to-back calls until noon and my office has a glass wall and everyone stares when I'm on the phone. My shop is 900 square feet. Your shop is quiet." She looked at the corner, looked at him, looked at the bench. "One rule," she said. "When there's a customer, you're invisible. You don't talk, you don't take calls, you step outside. Done." He stayed for 3 hours. He took 4 calls. He stepped outside for 2 of them because a customer came in both times. He brought back 2 coffees when he returned the second time, and he set one on the edge of Nadia's workbench without saying anything, and she didn't say anything either, but she drank it. This became a pattern. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, Fletcher showed up. He sat in the corner with his laptop and his calls. He learned to read the room. He learned that Nadia's grandfather, Ernesto, came in on Tuesday afternoons to sit and watch and occasionally offer opinions that Nadia accepted with the particular patience of someone who both loves and has mentally argued with a person 10,000 times. He learned that the older man with the mallet was called Dwight, and that he'd worked for Ernesto for 30 years and now worked for Nadia and regarded the whole situation as settled. He learned that Nadia took her lunch break at exactly noon, ate something she'd brought from home, and read for 20 minutes without apology, and that the 20 minutes were not negotiable. He learned that she was funny. Not performatively funny, not trying to be funny. Just dry and precise, and occasionally, when she thought something was genuinely absurd, she would say exactly what she thought with no softening, and the result was better than most things Fletcher had paid to sit in front of at comedy clubs. "You're wearing the left one more than the right," she said one Thursday, not looking up from a saddle Oxford she was recrafting. "You're compensating for something. Old injury? College. Track left ankle? Left knee." She made a sound of acknowledgement. "I can build up the left heel a couple millimeters. Might even it out. You can do that?" "I can do a lot of things." She glanced up, most of which you'd know about if you ever asked about the work instead of just sitting in the corner looking important. Fletcher smiled. It came out before he could decide whether to let it. "Tell me about the work," he said. So she did. She explained what she was doing to the saddle Oxford and why, and then she explained what she'd done to his shoe, and why, and then she explained the difference between a good soul and a great one, and the difference between fixing something and restoring something, and by the end of it Fletcher had missed an 11:30 call and didn't notice until noon when Nadia stood up to eat her lunch. He went back to his office with the particular feeling of someone who has been fed something that was not on the menu and is still thinking about it. He also went back to the shop on the following Tuesday, with a broken heel on a different pair of shoes, and Nadia looked at him, then at the shoe, then at him. "How did you break this heel?" she asked. "I dropped something on it." "You dropped something on your heel." "It was a heavy something." "What was it?" A very long pause. He sat down. "I might have stepped on it wrong." "You stepped on your own heel wrong." The floor was uneven. "The floor," she said with the patient tone of someone who has decided the explanation is not going to improve, "of your office." It was a different office. A client's. Dwight, in the back, set down his mallet. "That's the worst story I've heard this month," Dwight said. "It's only the fourth," Fletcher pointed out. Still, Nadia took the shoe. She was trying not to smile, and she was almost succeeding almost. Fletcher noticed. He held that almost smile like something he'd found and was quietly putting in his pocket. Ernesto came in that Tuesday afternoon, as he always did. He was 73, small and straight-backed, with the hands of someone who had worked with them every day for 60 years and was not embarrassed by the evidence. He looked at Fletcher on the bench in the corner for a long moment before sitting down in his chair by the window. "You come here a lot," Ernesto said in English that carried its original music underneath. "I do," Fletcher said. "What do you do?" "I run a technology company. Financial software, mostly." Ernesto nodded slowly. "And you sit in a shoe shop." "It's where I think best." The old man looked at him with the particular attention of someone who has lived long enough to know the difference between what people say and what they mean. "She doesn't need someone to complicate her life," Ernesto said, not unkindly. "I know," Fletcher said. "Do you?" It wasn't a question. Fletcher understood that. "I'm not trying to complicate anything," he said. "I'm just..." He stopped. He didn't know how to finish the sentence, and it wouldn't sound like something he'd say in a meeting, so he said, the honest version. "She's the first person in a long time who doesn't care who I am, and I don't know what to do with that." Ernesto was quiet for a moment. "That's a better answer than I expected," the old man said. "Should I be offended by that?" "Probably not." Ernesto looked at his hands. "My wife used to say that the people who are most impressed by money are the ones who know the least about work." She meant it as an insult. I think she was right. Fletcher thought about that for the rest of the afternoon. What he didn't notice was that a man named Seth Pryor had begun appearing outside the shop. Not every day. Once, then twice, then 3 times in 2 weeks. Always with a coffee he didn't drink, always positioned at the angle where he could see inside. Seth Pryor was 32, and he had spent the last 9 months believing he and Nadia were going to find their way back to each other. They had dated for 2 years. They had broken up because he had, in his own words, not been ready for the kind of commitment she deserved, which was a thing men said when they wanted to keep someone available while declining to be available themselves. He had since become ready, or so he believed, and he had since discovered that Nadia had not been waiting for him, which seemed to him deeply unfair. He watched Fletcher through the window and understood things he didn't like. Seth worked in commercial real estate. He had a friend named Gareth who worked in corporate finance, and Gareth knew people who knew things about Fletcher Caine's company, Caine Capital Solutions. Gareth was the kind of person who filed away everything useful and waited to see when it might matter. It was a Tuesday when Seth called Gareth. "What do you know about Caine's company?" Seth asked. "Enough," Gareth said. What Gareth knew, which Seth then turned into something else, was that Caine Capital Solutions was in the middle of a significant acquisition. The target was a mid-sized insurance firm, with offices in 3 cities including Austin. If the acquisition went through, there were likely to be layoffs, consolidation, and the usual corporate frictions of merger. What Seth did with this information was take it to a local business journalist he'd once done a favor for and suggest, without any evidence, that the layoffs were not likely but certain, and that the acquisition was predatory, and that the company being absorbed had no idea what was actually coming. The article ran on a Friday. It named Fletcher Caine. It was wrong in several significant ways, but it was not wrong enough to be ignored. Fletcher read it at 6 in the morning and felt his stomach drop. He called his communications director. He called his legal team. He called the journalist who did not answer. He stood at his window looking at the city and thought about all the hours he had spent in the last month sitting in a shoe shop learning things he hadn't thought to want to know. He didn't go to the shop that Tuesday. He didn't go on Thursday either. On Friday, Nadia noticed. She noticed because she had started to expect him, which was its own complicated thing to sit with. She noticed because the bench in the corner felt emptier than it was. She noticed and then she told herself she was not noticing, and then she noticed herself doing that. Dwight came in at 9. "Your regular's not here," Dwight said. "He's not a regular. He's a customer who comes by sometimes. He's here every Tuesday and Thursday and occasionally the other days. That's his schedule, not mine." Dwight picked up his mallet, set it down. "You see the article about his company?" Nadia looked up. "What article?" She read it on her phone during her lunch break. She read it twice. The second time, she was looking for the parts that didn't add up, the places where the sourcing was thin and the language turned speculative, the moments where someone was suggesting rather than stating. There were a lot of those moments. She was still thinking about it when Seth walked in at 3 o'clock. "Hey," he said, like it hadn't been 4 months since she'd told him to stop texting her. Seth I was in the neighborhood. She waited. "Rough week for your..." He paused, and the pause held something deliberate. "Friend, what do you know about it?" "Just what I read." His tone was careful in the way of someone who has rehearsed their way to sounding casual. "These tech guys, you know. They come in, they buy things, they shake hands, and then the people underneath pay for it." Nadia looked at him for a long moment. "How do you know Gareth Moss?" she said. Seth blinked. "What? Gareth Moss. He's cited as a financial industry source in the article. I went to college with his younger sister. She mentioned you two went to the same firm event last spring." Seth's careful posture shifted by about 2 degrees. "Nashville is a small town," he started. "This is Austin," Nadia said. "I meant Seth." She set down her brush. Her voice was even, which was worse than if it had been loud. "I don't know what you think you were doing, but whatever it was, it involved someone's livelihood, and I need you to understand that I find that genuinely disgusting." She picked up the brush again. "Please go." He went. Nadia sat for a while after the door closed. She picked up her phone and found Fletcher's number and typed a message. Deleted it. Typed it again. "I read the article. I also read between the lines. If you want to talk, I'll be here until 6. She hit send before she could think too much about it. Fletcher read the message on the sidewalk outside his building where he'd gone to make a call without his team watching him. He read it 3 times. Then he got in his car and drove to the east side. He walked into the shop at 5:15. Nadia was at the workbench. Dwight had already gone home. "Hi," he said. "Hi." She didn't stop working. "You look terrible." "Thanks. I was going for distinguished fatigue. You got regular fatigue." He sat on the bench. She continued working. For a while, neither of them said anything, and the quiet was the kind that didn't need to be filled. "Someone leaked a speculative story," Fletcher said eventually. The reporter ran with it without verifying because the sourcing sounded credible, and there was a deadline. "The acquisition is real. The layoffs are not. The whole point of this acquisition is to add their infrastructure to ours and expand capacity." He rubbed his face. "There's no elimination, there's growth." Nadia was quiet for a moment. "Why didn't you tell them that? My communications team is preparing a statement." "That's a statement. I asked why you didn't tell them." Fletcher looked at his hands. Because I've been a little distracted. Nadia's brush paused. By what? She asked. He looked at her. She looked at him. By this, he said, which was not a complete sentence and they both knew it, but the incomplete part of it was the true part, and they both knew that too. Nadia set her brush down. She turned on her stool and faced him properly. Fletcher, she said, and it was the first time she'd used his first name, just his first name, without the slightly professional distance she usually maintained. Why have you been coming here? Honestly? Preferably. He took a breath. Because the first time I walked in, you told me to come back in 3 days and meant it, and I didn't know what to do with that. And then every time I came back you said exactly what you thought, without any performance or positioning. And I started to realize I couldn't remember the last time someone talked to me like I was just a person. He stopped. Like I was just someone standing in a shop with a broken shoe. Nadia was quiet for a long moment. My grandfather told you to stay out of my way, she said. He told me not to complicate your life. Are you going to? I don't know. I'd like to try not to. Trying not to complicate something and succeeding at not complicating it are different things. I know, your world is complicated. Companies and acquisitions and articles and boardrooms. That's your life, it is. He didn't look away. But I'm also the person who has been sitting in the corner of a shoe shop for a month learning why a well-made sole lasts longer than a cheap one. Both things are true. Nadia looked at him for a long time. The radio was playing something low and old. I think I know who fed the journalist that story, she said. Fletcher's expression shifted. Who? She told him about Seth and about Gareth Moss, and about the timing of the article, and the careful way Seth had walked into the shop that afternoon, and the 2-degree shift in his posture when she'd said Gareth's name. Fletcher was very still while she talked. His source is a business contact, Fletcher said slowly. Not an insider. He couldn't have gotten accurate information, which is why everything specific in the article is wrong. Can you prove that? Give me until Monday. She looked at him. Come back Monday, he said. I'll tell you what I find out. You're going to ask me to hold space in my shop for your crisis management. I'm going to ask you to trust me for 3 days. Something in Nadia's expression shifted, just slightly. 3 days, she said. You can come back Monday. Fletcher almost said same as last time, but the thing that actually came out was, thank you. He left, and Nadia stayed at her workbench, and the radio played, and she thought about a man who had walked in with a broken shoe and had not, in all the weeks since, once tried to fix anything with money. That was the part that kept surprising her. The weekend passed. Fletcher worked. He had his communications director issue a full statement with documentation, a letter from the CEO of the firm being acquired expressing his own support for the deal, and a clear breakdown of the expansion plan. He also had his legal team send a letter to the journalist publication requesting a correction and detailing the inaccuracies, and he dug into Gareth Moss. What he found was that Gareth had a financial interest in a competing firm that would have benefited from the acquisition falling through, a conflict of interest that he had not disclosed when contacted as a source. By Sunday evening, Fletcher had everything he needed. He also found, somewhat incidentally, that Seth Pryor had sent Nadia 14 text messages in the past 3 months that she had not responded to, which he knew because Seth had mentioned them publicly in a comment thread on Austin's business news site, which was its own kind of information. Fletcher did not feel good about knowing this. He also could not stop thinking about it. On Monday morning, he walked into the shop at 10:03, which was 1 minute later than the first time, and he had decided during the drive that whatever happened next, he was going to tell her all of it. Nadia was at the workbench. Dwight nodded from the back. You're back, she said. 3 days, he said, as promised. He sat on the bench. He told her about Gareth's conflict of interest and the correction the publication had agreed to issue, and the letter from the acquired firm's CEO, and the full disclosure of the expansion plan that was now public record. He also told her about Seth's comment thread. Nadia listened to all of it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. You didn't have to tell me about the comment thread, she said. I know. I told you anyway. Why? Because I decided a few weeks ago that I wasn't going to hide things to seem better than I am, and I'm trying to keep that commitment. Nadia turned back to her workbench. She picked up a piece of leather and started trimming it. Seth and I broke up 9 months ago, she said. He decided he wasn't ready. He has apparently decided since then that he was wrong. He is, in fact, wrong about that. Okay. He's also apparently willing to put other people's livelihoods at risk to manage his own feelings, which tells me everything I need to know about his readiness for anything. That's a fair assessment. I'm good at fair assessments. She trimmed the leather with 2 clean cuts. You want to ask me something? I do. Ask it. I'd like to take you to dinner, Fletcher said. Not somewhere expensive to be impressive. Somewhere good. I'd like to sit across from you and talk about something other than shoes and acquisitions and ex-boyfriends who make bad decisions. Nadia was quiet for a moment. You'd have to wear the Italian ones, she said. I didn't do that repair for you to walk around in something inferior. Fletcher looked down at his shoes. The left one. Rebonded seamless. Exactly right. I wouldn't dream of it, he said. She smiled. Not the almost smile he'd been cataloging for weeks. A real one. Tuesday, she said. I'm closed Tuesday evenings. Tuesday it is. Ernesto came in that afternoon, as he always did. He looked at Fletcher on the bench. He looked at Nadia at the workbench. He sat down in his chair by the window. She said yes, he asked Fletcher. She said Tuesday. The old man nodded slowly, with the expression of someone revising an estimate upward. Don't be late, Ernesto said. She's never late. Fletcher was not late. They went to a place Nadia chose, a small Oaxacan restaurant 3 blocks from the shop, run by a family she'd known her whole life. The owner, a woman named Berta, who had known Ernesto since the 80s, brought food without being asked and told Fletcher he had good posture, which he took as a compliment. Nadia translated 2 things Berta said in Spanish that made her laugh, and then refused to translate the third, which made Fletcher certain it was about him, which made him smile. They talked for 3 hours. He told her about his father, who had started the company, and died of a heart attack at 58 before he could see what it became. He told her about the years he'd spent trying to be what the company needed, and forgetting to figure out what he needed, and how those 2 things had started to feel like the same thing until they suddenly didn't. She told him about her grandmother, who had taught her to cook, and to keep accounts, and to never apologize for knowing what something was worth. She told him about the year she'd spent in graduate school before deciding that what she actually wanted was already waiting for her on the east side, in a shop that smelled like leather and oil and 60 years of her family's work. When they walked out, the street was quiet and the October air had gone cool, and Fletcher said what he'd been not saying for weeks. I'd like to keep doing this, he said. Eating dinner, spending time with you, in whatever form that takes. This, or the shop, or something else entirely. Nadia looked at him for a moment. You know my world, she said. You've been sitting in it for a month. I know. Do you know what you're getting into? It's not glamorous. It's early mornings and old leather and occasionally a customer who tries to argue with me about what good work costs. I know, he said. I've seen it. And you're not trying to fix it or improve it or invest in it. I would never because I've had people try to invest in it before, she said. I don't need investment. I need someone who understands that this is what I am, not just what I do. Fletcher looked at the shop from the end of the block, at the green sign, at the lights still on inside where Dwight had left them. The shoes on the top shelf, he said. Your grandfather's first repair. They're worth more than anything in my office. Nadia looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said. Okay. She tucked her hands into her jacket pockets. Don't break anything else on purpose. I won't. And if you do, I'll know. I believe you. She went inside. He stood on the sidewalk until the light upstairs came on, the apartment above the shop where she lived, and he thought about how he had been inside 100 important rooms in the past 10 years and never felt as present in any of them as he did standing outside a shoe shop on the east side of Austin on a Tuesday in October. Then he got in his car and drove home, and he was still thinking about it when he walked into his apartment and took off his shoes, and he looked at the left one, the repaired one, and he thought about what she'd said. The soul separation happened at the flex point. You've been putting stress on a joint that was already weakening. She had been talking about the shoe. He was fairly certain she had also, in some precise and accurate way, been talking about him. 6 months later, the correction had run. The acquisition had closed. The expansion was underway, and no one had been laid off. Gareth Moss had quietly resigned from his firm after his undisclosed conflict of interest became a matter of public record. Seth Pryor had sent one more message, which Nadia had not answered, and after that, nothing. The shop on the east side had not changed. The green sign was still there, Ernesto still came on Tuesday afternoons. Dwight still used the mallet. The little shoes on the top shelf still kept their place. What had changed was that on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, there was a second coffee on the corner of the workbench, and Fletcher Caine had learned to read the room well enough that Nadia only had to look at him once when a customer came in. Before he stepped outside, and he had stopped explaining why he'd broken the things that needed repair, because they both knew now that he came in because he wanted to be there. And she let him be there because she wanted him to be, and some things didn't need more explanation than that. On a Thursday in April, Ernesto came in early. He sat in his chair by the window. He looked at Nadia at the workbench. He looked at Fletcher in the corner with his laptop. "You're still here," Ernesto said to Fletcher. "Still here," Fletcher said. The old man looked at his hands, then at the shoes on the top shelf. "My wife," Ernesto said. "She used to say that you could tell everything about a man by the condition of his shoes." He paused. "She meant care. Whether a person took care of the things they were given." Fletcher looked at his shoes, the Italian ones. The left one still seamless, still right. "I have a very good repair person," he said. Ernesto nodded slowly. The expression was different from the one he'd worn 9 months ago, revised further upward. "Don't let her wait," Ernesto said. "She's never late, but she's patient. Don't confuse her patience for permission to take your time." Fletcher looked across the shop at Nadia, who was trimming leather with 2 clean cuts and was absolutely, completely not listening, which meant she had heard every word. "I know," Fletcher said. And that Tuesday evening, which was the evening Nadia was always closed, Fletcher came in at 5:30 with something in his jacket pocket, and a question he had been practicing since March, and a strong suspicion that she was going to say something dry and exact and completely honest before she said yes. He was right about all 3, and when she did say yes, it was with the same precision she brought to everything. No ceremony, no performance, just the particular clarity of someone who knows exactly what something is worth and has decided it's worth keeping. Dwight in the back set down his mallet. "Took long enough," Dwight said. "It's only been 6 months," Fletcher said. "That's what I said." Nadia laughed. It was the real one. Fletcher had it memorized by now, the specific sound of it, and he thought he would probably spend a long time being glad he'd walked into a shoe shop with a broken sole and been told, without apology, to come back in 3 days. Some things, it turned out, were worth waiting for.